Welcome to the Boundless Bible. My name is David Shapiro.
Hey, I'm Javi Marquez.
And I'm Jason Holloway.
Welcome to the Boundless Bible. I am excited, but also a little bit confused to talk about what I want to bring up today, if you guys don't mind giving me a little bit of leeway, because it's March, and what I'm going to talk about has a little bit to do with a Christmas story that everybody has heard of, which is good because you'll be familiar with the story, but I have some questions on it, one particular question, and this one I actually need your help to answer because I was studying, and I got to a point where I'm going, man, I might have been wrong about what I assumed this Christmas story was about. And this has to do with the innkeeper. This has to do with the point of the story of there's no room at the inn.
Right.
Which again, we've heard that if you go to Christmas services, you've probably heard this story. But the question I have is this a story about missed opportunities to receive blessings, which we've heard?
Yeah.
Or is this a story about making room for Jesus? And sermons discuss like, hey, don't miss your opportunity all year round to make room for Jesus, making room at the inn. Or, and I'm going to kind of pose this way, is this about God can show up and does show up in unexpected places and circumstances?
Even when you're not ready for it, right?
Yes. And
should you be ready to let them in? That's kind of the
the
premise.
And I'll tell you something interesting, and I'm just going to read this passage, and what it is it's Luke 2:7.
Okay.
And what it says specifically is, and she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them at the inn.
Yeah.
Let me read that last line.
Yeah,
there was no place for him at the inn. Not there was no room at the inn. There was no place for him at the inn. And this is the part where I was like, wait a minute, why wouldn't they just say there's no room at the inn? They say there's no place for him. And I started to realize that when you look at the culture of Israel, Israelis would always help a neighbor. Joseph was a Bethlehemite. He lived in Bethlehem. That's where he was born. That was his home.
Right.
So you have a son who comes home with a pregnant woman. They would never say there's no room.
Right.
It's just not something that the Jewish tradition would have allowed.
Yeah.
And if we're saying this is a Jewish village, I believe that there was a room at the inn. That's my first kind of shocking moment and go, well, what does that mean? There's no place. What I think happened was she is a birthing woman.
Exactly.
A birthing woman cannot be around other people because she would be
she needs to be
clean.
She'd be unclean.
Right.
And now she had a boy, so she's unclean for 40 days. If she had a girl, it would have been 60 days according to Jewish tradition.
Okay.
But she was unclean. So it wasn't there was no room at the inn. It was, hey, we have room here, but there's all these people here.
Right.
So you can't be in this room. However, if you go to the back of the stables where there are no people, you can now give birth. Because remember, back then, not only you're unclean from the blood in the area, but you're not allowed to tidy up your home. You're not allowed to cook.
Right.
If you're getting fed, they actually put on a tray, put the tray on the floor, move away, you pick up the tray to eat. The only thing you can do is care for your child.
Yeah.
You can't do that in a place that other people are living.
Yeah.
So I think no place at the inn there was room at the inn, but there was no place.
Well, the AMP Bible actually says here, it says, and she gave birth to her son, her firstborn, and she wrapped him in swaddling clothes. That's the subtext. And laid him in a manger because there was no subtext private room for them in the inn.
Right.
So again, you're back to that word private, and I think you're back onto something. I mean, it's like the tradition was keeping them from being with the people, not the actual spatial arrangement necessarily.
And we always have this vision. Again, it's movies. A movie comes out and we go, oh, that must have been what it is. We have this vision of it's a hotel, which it does not say a hotel. No. The word inn is actually different. Yeah. In Hebrew, it's kaluma, which means lodging place or upper room. It's the same word used when Jesus went to the upper room to have his Passover meal with so it could have been upper room. When you look at Bethlehem and the way that their homes were, you had the home in the front, and behind it was a cave system. That's where they had their animals, was in the cave. And what it produced was heat because you had all of them living behind them.
Right.
So you had the heat that they produced, but they also couldn't leave without you knowing because they're behind that
you, right?
Where the house is. So it's not these stables that we look at today in this farm system. And, we think about, the movie Yellowstone in Montana where you have the stables and that's where they're living and, or it's a barn. No, this would have been a cave system living behind the house. And Mary and Joseph would have been at the very back. They would have been behind all of the animals. And that's where they would have given birth to Jesus. Mm-hmm. So it's just all of the visuals that we have from this story changes a little bit when you look at the exact wording and you look at the Hebrew translation of it. And it's just something where if you look at the line beforehand, it also gives some clue. And the line beforehand says they had to go back to Bethlehem for the registry, Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, it came time for her to give birth.
Right.
They were already there. Mm-hmm. They were already somewhere. Were they living in the house? They're already there. And now she's ready to give birth. And they go, there's no place anymore at the end. Again, it's not as if they walked in. This visual that we have of, hey, they're walking into town.
Right.
There's the hotel. I'm about to give birth. No,
right.
It's
we're minutes away from the birth. And like, I need somewhere right now. No, it's not like that. That's true.
Yeah. They were already there. And then she was ready to give birth. And then there was no place for them. Again, private room for them in that inn. When you bring all that together, this is not the visual of an innkeeper, a nasty man going, no, there's no room here. You're about to give birth. Get in the stables. This changes that story a little bit. So I come back to that question.
He may even be sorrowful. Like he almost theoretically, he might even be like, man, I know what it's like. You're about to give birth. My wife has given birth and you're about to go through it. But like, unfortunately, by tradition, I can't have you in here with everybody else.
100%. And that's why I'm saying, is the question, hey, this is about missed opportunities to receive blessing? Or is this more about God can and does show up in unexpected places wherever he wants?
I think the answer is yes, yes, and yes. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, is this the way the story happened? We have we talk all the time about the literal, the metaphorical, the analogy, the deeper meaning and so forth. And so this is a case where I think it can and should be all of the above. To understand, I do think it changes the story a little bit. It's not like the Jewish people were going, hey, get over there in the back. Like it wasn't this angry, person who was Sadduceezing them or Pharisaizing them. They were just, they were just saying, no, that's not the way this goes. That's not how we're structured.
Yep.
That's not how we work. So you're going to have to do that over there. And, I don't know, for some reason that emotive difference is different. It feels different. It makes the story a bit different. But then you also have to ask yourself the question, are we the innkeeper? Are we being asked for a place and being asked to overcome our tradition of whatever we're used to doing? Our fleshly body is used to being in control. Our human body is used to arrogance and selfishness and so forth and so on. So when God calls, are we willing to say, you know what, come on in, even though it's out of my tradition, come on in anyway? So it can be that metaphorical story as well.
Oh, that's good. While you were saying that and you're talking about the Pharisees and the Sadducees, this is the first time, because we look at the Pharisees and going, because of their tradition, they didn't understand what Jesus was saying.
Right.
This is actually the first time where tradition
got in the way of doing what was
Jesus.
Right. Well, got in the way of doing what was truly the loving thing.
Yes.
Right? Like Jesus came to say that it's not about the things you do, it's the heart you do them with, the heart from with which you do them. Mm-hmm. Right? That's what he does.
Yeah.
And so this is the very first time that's not the case. This is the very first time that somebody says, I see you, I know this is a bad deal for you, but this is the way we do things.
Yeah, that's powerful. I didn't think about that. See there, and then there's that fourth version of it where you can look at it and go, the tradition is really what's holding back the Jewish people from doing what God's true commission is, which is forget the tradition, just love me and love others.
Right.
Here's the fifth version of that.
Okay.
Since you said fourth, I look at it as it's exactly what you were saying before, in the sense of like the tradition of it. She couldn't be around others giving pregnancy or giving birth, and he found a place for her, or they have a place for her that was safe, that was calm, it was warm, like you were saying, and I think it was humble. I think it just plays along with what God orchestrated, said from the beginning. the humble birth, just the humility of it, right? Of he's not this great king. He is a great king, but he wasn't like, he didn't come and, birth through, wasn't birthed and it was like in a palace. It wasn't gold. It wasn't, many midwives and stuff like that. It was a goat, and Joseph there trying to figure out what's going on. And I think that just plays on God orchestrating this once again. And I hate to put this together because it doesn't go together, but I look at Judas almost the same way, playing in God's plan for our redemption, right? Although if Judas would not do what he did to Jesus and betraying him, we would probably not have him on the cross. So he played a plan in the redemption story for us. The innkeeper played a plan in the humility of our God and coming to earth.
And with the statement of humility, again, it just, you said gold and it popped something else. Like he wasn't born in this chariot of gold.
Right, he wasn't, yeah.
But it also reminds me of the humility. We look at another part of the story right after is, first of all, we know that they were there for several months because the wise men come. It wasn't like they were waiting right there. They were looking for the signs.
Fun fact, how many wise men?
That doesn't actually.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Oh, really?
No,
yeah.
That doesn't actually.
It doesn't say. It doesn't say. Even though we have this tradition of three, it doesn't say. They abide by three because the frankincense, gold, and myrrh.
Yeah.
So they say that, but there's actually no indication of how many there were.
That's good.
Correct. And going with I was actually leading right into the frankincense.
Were you?
Myrrh and gold.
Yeah.
Because of the gold reminded me. When we look at Joseph and Mary, they were not wealthy.
No,
in fact, they were very poor.
Right.
When they went and dedicated Jesus at the temple, they had to use poor sacrifice because they didn't have money.
Right.
But when you look at them after the angel said, "Hey, you have to escape here. You have to go to Egypt," they went and spent a couple of years in Egypt.
Yeah.
How did they do that with no money?
Yeah.
I believe,
the gold,
again,
frankincense, and myrrh.
The gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
Yeah, look at that.
God provided that for them because these were wealthier materials that they could probably sell and live off of while they were there. So he was giving he's providing for them, even though they had this humble beginning. He didn't give them, hey, you can have a huge mansion and, you're not going to be like Joseph and eventually, become vizier. No, we're going to give you just enough to spend a couple of years there.
Well, let's go also to the fact that the wise men are wise men. It's not three guys. Right? It's not three guys came to find this Jesus character.
No.
It's three wise men, which, signifies probably regal, royalty from other countries who come to Bethlehem to find him. And where did they find him? It's a very surprising thing. They find him in a manger, or they find him in this non-royal. Actually, where did they go first? They first go to the palace.
Yeah, they were expecting.
They go to the palace because that's what they expected.
Yeah,
they didn't get that. King, they got a baby in a manger in a.
That was the whole thing, right? They were expecting a king, which is why Herod. Did I say that right? Herod wanted to execute this king, this other king that's going to a threat to him.
But it's so that's the humility part. Is like I'm going back to that humility part. I think it's so important that everybody in the story has to acknowledge that it is God, or it is Jesus, or it is the the Son of God. But in a place that they wouldn't expect. Just like we expect God to come down from the sky and tell us what's our next step, instead of accepting that it's kind of right in front of us, and yet we're not willing to see it, right? Mm-hmm. We're not willing to acknowledge the thought that we have inside of our head, and we're not willing to give up something else to do it. It's like this, again, the humility versus the regality, or the humility versus the expectation of height and highness. Is kind of the crucial point of all of this anyway.
Which is amazing because the story ultimately doesn't change.
Right.
Whether the innkeeper was welcoming, whether he, said, no, get out of here. You can go and, in the manger and where the animals are and, in the stables, no matter what it is, the ultimate end of the story happens the same. Mm-hmm. But I wonder about today, and I go, okay, if it's not about just letting God in your heart all year round and just being open to God all year round, if it also has other undertones in there and going, hey, God can turn up unexpectedly. And are you being humble? And do you have the humility and all the things we just discussed? Right. I looked at today and I go, you hit the nail on the head, Jason, where, all right, are my traditions hurting my relationship, my openness for God? And am I going, listen, with so many denominations fighting back and forth, are we sticking so closely to our tradition.
And I would even expand the word tradition in this sense, especially to somebody who doesn't have one, an atheist or an agnostic. I would say your habits. Are your habits getting in the way of your relationship with God? Are your, current ways of doing things getting in the way of God? And I think the answer is yes to all of us, right? We just have to acknowledge it.
Yeah, I look at the story a little differently. I just look at it as God's plan, and that was God orchestrating the way he wanted the birth to be.
I see that.
I didn't see anything more deeper to the innkeeper than, hey man, I don't have any room for you and you're pregnant. I can't have you around other guests. This is the best I could do. And it's just God orchestrating that. I say that only because the angels was with them throughout the way, so if God wanted to make a different room and they have this, the master, this
the master bedroom.
the what do you call it? What is it, the bridal suite or whatever?
Bridal suite,
what do you call it? Yeah.
The honeymoon suite.
Yeah, the honeymoon suite. Yeah, like he could have made it happen if he wanted to in that way. So that's how I see for the story. But I understand what you're talking about. I think you onto something with that, David.
I think there's also something to Javi. You kind of opened something else up for me too, which is the fact that this really is similar to the end of the story. Like this is very similar to the end of the story. Everybody expected him to ride in on a white horse in a golden palace and come take over the world. And instead, the highest God of all came in on a donkey.
Yeah.
Right. And in a manger and without anything.
Right.
And the end of the story, everybody expected him to, do these crazy things. And he ended up sitting on a cross with people mocking him and calling him the king of the Jews. Like, he came in the way he went out. And
that's good.
And yet he left while he was here was so much bigger. And it just goes to show that all of us are living so much for this grand thing.
Yeah.
When probably the reward is in something much more humble.
Yeah. I think to me, it's more relatable in the sense of like, if I was born with not much, or I was dealt some bad cards, right? In life, right? People want to look at it that way. Man, we have a God that went through the same thing you have.
Worse,
he
far
loved
worse,
you
in
so
fact.
much. Yeah. And
far worse, in fact, right?
And far worse. Yeah. And he's there for you to show you like, hey, I wasn't I wasn't on this throne. I wasn't given everything to me to make these things happen. No, I still struggled through a lot of things. And that's not the whole point of living, to live this lavish life, but just to do good. With little, you could still do so much.
Right.
Right. And that's what I learned reading the Bible and reading and seeing Jesus' life.
I agree.
It's like with so little, you can still do so much, because people can still look at Jesus and go, wait a minute, you had this power to heal and do all these other things.
But so do
I don't have that. I can't do much.
But so do you, right?
Do.
We do have the power to heal. We do have the power to help. We do have the power to sacrifice parts of our lives for the betterment of others. We do have that power, and it doesn't come.
Man, I got chills over that. It's like it's such an amazing thing that God gives us that power, and through that's through the Holy Spirit and through discernment and through just seeking God in that way. We're able to touch other people's lives and make it better, help them out the best we can.
Even when you talk about humility, we look at again the story of when they're already there. Even going to Bethlehem, being in Bethlehem and born there. It's only a place of a couple hundred people. The Hebrew name Bethlehem, literally means house of bread.
Yeah, really.
So,
were they all in that inn?
So, there was no room. A few hundred of them. They were all there.
That's the other thing, right? They were going for a census, right? They were all flocking back to where they're from, which is
also why the inn was. Which, by the way, going back full circle, that's probably why the inn was full. Right.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, that, and we also have to understand, again, this is going back to true Jewish tradition and our thoughts in our brain. We have this thought that, like, we know the houses weren't huge, but we have this thought of there's a house, there's a family, mother, father, couple kids, they're living, in a couple rooms.
Cohabitation, right?
Typically, it was one room.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then even when you had slaves that were there, when you had other family members were there, when people came back in a town, you invited them in. They have records of up to 50 people sleeping in a room. Mm-hmm. This was not, again, another reason why there was no room at the end. There was room. There was no place.
And where were they sleeping?
So
probably on the floor.
On the floor.
Where Mary was able to give birth on hay, right? Some support, some kind of like a little bit comfortable spot to give birth to our God.
You ever lay on hay, Javi?
Huh?
You ever lay on hay?
Did I say hay?
Yeah. I mean, but have you ever laid on hay? It's not comfortable.
No, I bet it's not.
I'm just
it's probably better than the floor.
Probably.
Unless you're allergic. No, but it is.
It wasn't that much better. I'm just saying.
The humility started from the very beginning.
Yeah.
This was the town that was going to happen. Several hundred people in a house that was probably inhabited by multiple people, moving there to the back of the cave behind even where the animals are.
Yeah.
I mean, one after the other. We do see that. So I think it is probably what you said in the beginning, Jason. Yes, 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 and yes.
Yeah. It's all the above.
It's all of them. And that's what it is. It is about humility. It is about, God wanting people to put him in his heart. It's about tradition and stopping.
Getting in the way. Yeah.
And I mean, man, it's just, this
That's
story
good.
has so much more than just a couple of lines. And there's so much packed into that.
Yeah.
It's just really the glory.
That reminds me of
what
what was like what Jason said before, just kind of the ending of Jesus going to the cross is exactly that. It's the humility part of it. It's the tradition that got in the way of people.
That's what I'm saying. The whole story repeats itself over and over and over.
Back.
It's
wow,
so
that's
consistent, isn't it? It's really consistent. Like
I
it's
just feel
really
like we just unbound that right there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to keep saying the same thing over and over, but this is the thing about the whole Bible. It's
profound, yeah.
But the whole Bible does this. Like
you said that about the Old Testament forever, Jason.
It's just like if it hasn't been beaten into your head by now, like you're not gonna get it. Like just keep paying. All you have to do is pay a little attention. You're gonna see pattern after pattern after pattern after pattern after pattern evolve.
Yeah.
And that's what teaches you about the nature of God.
Yeah.
That's what teaches you about the nature of Jesus and the nature of humanity. And that's what the whole Bible is. It's just patterns teaching you about who God is.
Yeah.
Through those patterns.
Amen. Yeah.
David, thanks for the question. This is a solid one.
No, listen, I appreciate you guys. Like I said, I was going back and forth in my brain, and you guys just opened it up. I guess I should thank you and not thank you because you just put 3 different levels in my brain to think. Yeah. But I do appreciate you kind of taking some grace and talking a little bit about a Christmas story in March, and
awesome.
This was great.
So, guys, thanks a lot for joining us as well. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the likes, follows, listens, subscribes. So the more, the merrier.
Yeah.
And we hope to talk to you again soon. Have a good day.
See ya.
See you guys.